So our second video in this beginning unit is on order of operations, how we use them, and what are parentheses for. So I know a lot of you heard of the order of operations, woo, and you've heard about PEMDAS, but a lot of people have learned it wrong. So I'm going to focus on the 4 steps. It's not 6 steps. The first step is your grouping symbols. And we'll talk a little bit more. That includes parentheses, square root, cube root, absolute value. All of those count as the first step. You've got to deal with them. And then your second step is your exponents. So there's 5 squared or -2 squared or any other exponent. That's the second thing you have to do. Then you're going to read your string of numbers and you're going to look from left to right doing any multiplication or division that comes along. And you do that in order. And then the last thing you're going to do is subtraction or addition. In order, left to right. That's your 4th step. So they have the grouping symbols that I talked about, but most of the time you're looking at parentheses, and that's your first step. But we need to know what the parentheses are there for. Most of the time they're there for multiplication. Like we might have a number outside of a parentheses, like this, indicating 5 times 3. The number is smashed up against it, so -5 times 3 would be -15. I'm going to change this to a different color. And then we could have 2 parentheses, so -5 smashed up against -3. There we don't have to draw that dot for multiplication, it just indicates multiplication. -5 times -3 is +15. And if we have a parentheses and it has more than one term in it, like this is one term and another term, we have to multiply this number -5 by all the terms inside. So -5x smashed together, once again that means multiplication, -10 or plus a -10, same thing. Now these two cannot be added together because they're not like terms. We'll talk more about that later. The other reason we might have parentheses is to clear up a negative. For example, let's say we had 7 minus -6. That's kind of hard to tell, or these two negatives might look close together and make you think it's just 7 minus 6. So we often put it in parentheses to tell us that, hello, I'm negative. And that's the case. We can look at 7 minus -6, which is the same thing as 7 plus 6, which is 13. I'll put that back on the blue. The other time we want to use parentheses is to clear up the base of an exponent. So for example, if this -5 is in parentheses, it indicates that the base of this exponent is -5, which means it's -5 times -5, which is 25. Whereas if the parentheses are not there, the base is just the 5. So it's like 5 times 5. And then you have to go ahead and put that negative in at the end. Or you can think of it as a -1 times. Well, that didn't work out. Let me erase that. That did not work out. Let me write that again. So it's 5 times 5. Because the base is 5, and then we have the opposite of that. So it'd be -25. So the parentheses is here to tell me that the base is -5. So we have multiplication, and then we have, sometimes it's placed there to tell us that it's a negative number, and then sometimes it's used to make sure we know what the base is in an exponent. So not only are parentheses the first thing you have to do, but there are other things that serve as parentheses, and that's why we use the term grouping symbol. Because these things, parentheses, ask you to do it first, but so does a square root symbol. You're going to do any work that's underneath. So let's say it was the square root of 48 plus 1. We're going to have to do that 48 plus 1 first, and then we'd end up with the square root of 49. Notice I'm not putting my little 2 there because it's such a common question that we don't really need it. The square root of 49 is 7. Same thing here, if we have a cube root, we're going to go ahead and do that before anything else. I'm going to rewrite this 3. Oops, I didn't mean to highlight it, I meant to erase it. Really tiny right there, indicating that it is a cube root. When you're cube root, once again, we're looking for the number that multiplies by itself 3 times to get 8, which is 2. Also, absolute value, you'd have to do that first. So let's say it said 3 smashed up against the absolute value. You would do this absolute value part first. The absolute value would, negative 11 is 11, so you'd end up with 3 times a positive 11, which is 33. So let's do a couple together. So we look for the grouping symbols. There aren't any. So next we're going to look for the exponents. We have that right here. So there is our exponent. It's 5 squared. So we're going to do 3 minus 5 squared is 25. We don't have any multiplication and division, so we're just going to go ahead in order and do my addition and subtraction. So 3 minus 25 is negative 22 plus 3, and then negative 22 plus 3 is negative 19. So we're starting with the exponent. Notice this negative right here is not part of that base. You'd have to have it in parentheses for it to be so. Let's do a couple. So we're going to do a couple more. We're looking for, and so we're going to do 2, fun. 2 of them here. This is the first one we're going to look at. I'll make this black. Looking at it, there is a grouping symbol. So we're going to go ahead and do that first. So the negative 2 plus 6 times the cube root of 8, which is 2, because 2 times 2 times 2 is 8. There are no exponents, and so now we're going to look for multiplication or division in order. So here is our next piece. So you're going to negative 2 plus 12. And then there's just addition and subtraction left. So negative 2 plus positive 12 is positive 10. This one looks like this parentheses is just here for to tell us it's multiplication. So if you don't want to look at the parentheses, you can rewrite it. This parentheses, on the other hand, is reminding us we need to do that division. Remember, stacked means division. So negative 6 divided by 4 is the first thing we have to do. The negative 16 divided by 4 is negative 4. I think I just misspoke. So there was no there's no exponents. The grouping symbol here is telling you to do that first. And then we're going to go ahead, and this is multiplication, and this is multiplication. So we're going to go ahead and do that in order. So 3 times 2 is 6. Minus 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. I am going to put a parenthesis around that just to make sure I don't confuse myself with the 2 negatives. And 6 minus a negative 12 is the same thing as 6 plus a positive 12. So we end up with 18. There'll be a couple of problems for you to practice during the little formative quiz. See you later.